Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. So Bill Cassidy once again spoke out about Social Security and what he thinks needs to be done about the program. And he also gives his thoughts on Donald Trump's current situation. Plus we go over 3 huge changes this year to Social Security that you may not have known about. But before we go ahead and dive into the main content of today's video, if you wouldn't mind helping me out real quickly by just giving this video a like. That just helps out with the good old YouTube algorithm, and also consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already. Okay, so Donald Trump was indicted for the 4th time, this time, of course, in Georgia. It is being reported that he is going to turn himself in on Thursday, which, you know, obviously this is a huge situation because right now Donald Trump is the clear front runner in the Republican Party, and he might actually be the next president in 2024 if he happens to take down Joe Biden. So are we going to have a situation where, Donald Trump is going to be in prison and then he's going to be elected president? I mean, obviously this is the first time in our nation's history that this has happened, and whether or not you believe he's guilty, whether or not you believe he's innocent, obviously this is history in the making, and just a very sad situation in general. We're going to have half the country believing that he should be in prison for the rest of his life, and then we're going to have the other half of the country believing that he's being targeted by the other political parties. So obviously this is once again just another very divisive event that is taking place. And of course we have the debates within the Republican primary coming up tomorrow night, and Donald Trump will not be participating. Instead, he will be in a pre-recorded interview with Tucker Carlson, who of course left Fox News. So that's pretty much another slap in the face against Fox News by being interviewed by Tucker Carlson. We might actually have more viewers watching Trump being interviewed with Tucker Carlson than we have people actually watching the debate within the Republican primary. And right now we have a case where 65% of Republican voters are supporting Trump, whereas pretty much the people on the stage tomorrow night are going to be fighting for the other 35% of the vote. So according to The Hill, of course, Donald Trump is going to be turning himself in on Thursday after he is in that pre-recorded interview with Tucker Carlson. And he took to Truth Social to say, "Can you believe it? I'll be going to Atlanta, Georgia on Thursday to be arrested by a radical left district attorney, Fannie Willis, who is overseeing one of the greatest murder and violent crime disasters in American history." He continued, "In my case, the trip to Atlanta is not for murder, but for making a perfect phone call. She campaigned and is continuing to campaign and raise money on this witch hunt. This is in strict coordination with crooked Joe Biden's DOJ. It's all about election interference." And the real question here is whether or not this whole thing is going to continue. Are we going to have then Joe Biden, targeted by right-wing prosecutors? And are we going to turn into a situation where every president in this country in the future moving forward is going to be impeached and then targeted by the other party's prosecutor, by some district attorney in a right-wing or left-wing state? This is a road we probably don't want to go down. This does not make our country look good. This does not put our country in a good spotlight. And I'm in complete agreement that no president should be above the law. But, if we're having every president end up in prison, again, that's not a good thing either. So again, the debate is going to be tomorrow. And Bill Cassidy was actually on CNN. He, of course, is a Republican senator in Louisiana. And he talked a little bit about Donald Trump's situation, whether or not he would support Trump, whether or not he thinks that Trump should be the Republican nominee. And then he also touches base a little bit on Social Security and what he thinks the plan should be. Watch.
So let's talk now about the presidential race. We are 72 hours from the first Republican presidential debate. It's going to be missing the frontrunner, Donald Trump, the former president. He is facing federal charges over his efforts to overturn the election. And you did vote to convict him in his impeachment trial after January 6th. You said, quote, "because he is guilty." The former Attorney General, Bill Barr, says that the charges that have been brought against him are, quote unquote, responsible. Do you agree?
Well, I'm not an attorney. There's 91 charges, I think. I think the charge that seems most likely, seems almost a slam dunk, is the one related to mishandling of classified documents. So I can't comment on the rest of them because apparently you have to prove state of mind. You'll have attorneys after me that can comment on that. But there's at least one, which is the mishandling of the federal documents, which is seems, again, a very strong case. They have a tape recording of him speaking of it. If that is proven, then we may have a candidate for president who has been convicted of a crime. I think Joe Biden needs to be replaced, but I don't think Americans will vote for someone who's been convicted. I'm just very sorry about how all this is playing out.
Do you think that Donald Trump should drop out of the race?
I think so, but obviously that's up to him. I mean, you're just asking me my opinion, but he will lose to Joe Biden if you look at the current polls. I'm a Republican. I think any Republican on that stage in Milwaukee will do a better job than Joe Biden, and so I want one of them to win. If former President Trump ends up getting the nomination but cannot win a general, that means we'll have 4 more years of policies which have led to very high inflation, to a loss of purchasing power for the average American equivalent to $10,000, and to many other things which I think have been deleterious to our country's future.
So if Donald Trump does ultimately win the Republican nomination, will you vote for Joe Biden or the Democrat over the Republican on the ticket?
I'm going to vote for a Republican, but my threshold issue for any person who wants to be the leader of our country is, will you take care of the issues before us? Both Biden and Trump both have the same policy on Social Security, for example, which is to do nothing. Unfortunately, Social Security is going insolvent in 8 to 9 years, which means that somebody watching this who's getting Social Security is going to get a 24% cut. Both former President Trump, President Biden are basically saying you're going to get a 24% cut because I'm not going to do anything. Now, my threshold issue, if you want to be a leader of our country, is to lead. And right now we need someone who will lead on that issue.
Who on the debate stage on Wednesday night, of the other Republican alternatives to Donald Trump, do you think could be a leader on this issue that you raised, Social Security?
Well, at least some of them are talking about it. Frankly, I have a different approach than they, but at least they're talking about it. The first thing is to acknowledge that there's an issue. Now, the reason I hesitate on that is that the program I put forward, and again had 7 Republicans and 7 Democratic senators supporting, was to create a fund separate from Social Security, no Social Security dollars, to invest in the U.S. economy and allow it to grow over time. You do that, you can take care of 70% of the shortfall, and you can make sure that there's no cuts for people currently receiving social. We also put in work incentives, we repealed WEP and GPO, and we also put in poverty alleviation provisions. President Biden could have endorsed it. Instead, he's decided to be political and make this an issue. It should be an issue, but it should be an issue of fixing it, and so far he's not come up with a credible plan.
So Cassidy is absolutely right there about Social Security, at least. If nothing is done about the program in the next 10 years, there is going to be a 24% cut across the board. And right now, what people are receiving from Social Security obviously isn't enough. And if we're going to cut even more from their benefit, if we're going to cut 20 to 25% from each person's payment, let's say like right now, it's going to be even harder to get by. And you're pretty much going to have to go back and get at least a part-time, possibly a full-time job to supplement your Social Security check. But of course, there are also some big changes taking place within Social Security this year that the Motley Fool says we may just not know about. So we're going to be covering these changes right now. So once again, according to the Motley Fool, here are 3 changes to Social Security you probably didn't know. So the first change is getting harder to qualify for Social Security. If you put in a decent amount of time in the workforce, then qualifying for Social Security isn't all that difficult, given that the earnings threshold are pretty low. But if you're someone who's always worked on a part-time basis, then qualifying for benefits may end up being a challenge. Social Security eligibility hinges on earning 40 work credits in your lifetime at a maximum of 4 per year, but this year it takes $1,640 of earnings to attain 1 Social Security work credit. Last year it only took $1,510. So the amount that you need to earn is going up. The second change is that more earnings are being taxed for Social Security purposes. So Social Security's primary revenue source is payroll tax revenue, but workers don't necessarily pay Social Security tax on all of the earnings. There's a wage cap that limits on how much income can be taxed to fund Social Security. Last year, the wage cap was $147,000, but in 2023, it's $160,200. If that sounds like a large leap, you should know that some lawmakers are calling to lift the wage cap altogether. So in that context, having to pay Social Security tax on an extra $13,200 this year doesn't seem all that bad. And of course, in 2024, that number is likely to go up, let's say probably another 3%. And then, of course, there are a lot of lawmakers saying that people who are higher earners, those earning $250,000 or more or $400,000 or more, should have to pay into the Social Security payroll tax, which once again for employees is 6.2%. Their employer would match the other 6.2%, or if you're self-employed, of course, you pay the entire 12.4%. Now, the third change that the Motley Fool is saying is happening to Social Security this year, or next year in this case, is that next year's COLA could be a lot smaller. So each year, Social Security beneficiaries are eligible for a cost of living adjustment, or COLA, that's pegged to inflation. At the start of 2023, Social Security recipients saw their benefits rise 8.7% on the heels of a year of staggering inflation, but inflation has cooled notably in 2023, and that could set the stage for a much smaller COLA in 2024. So I have a couple things to mention here. First off, of course, there was that 8.7% increase this year, and I remember the White House and Joe Biden were bragging about that. Like, because of us, Social Security is going to see an increase of 8.7%. You're getting a huge lift in your benefits. So they were bragging about something that actually was kind of, caused by their administration. It's because of inflation. It's because of rising prices that Social Security beneficiaries saw this increase. It wasn't because they were generous and they wanted to see an increase. It was because inflation was so high. So they were bragging about causing inflation in a way which is really, really silly. And second of all, like they mentioned here, the COLA is going to be much lower next year. That, of course, isn't because inflation is coming down. Prices are not decreasing. Prices are still increasing on top of the 8.7% last year, but they're just increasing at a slower pace. So instead of going up another 8 to 9% this year, they're actually only going to be going up another 3 to 4%. So right now, we can expect a COLA increase next year to be anywhere between 3 to 3.8%, most likely probably between 3 to 3.4%. But that's all the news that we have for today's video. I certainly hope that you enjoyed and found value out of it. If you did, again, I would greatly appreciate if you could give this video a like. Consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already, and I will see you in the next video.